Hello, I'm Brian Fox. Welcome to I Hate Rock Music. This is another in my series of great bands from Seattle that most people have never heard of. And today I'm going to do a video on SADHAPPY. And they are truly legendary in Seattle. Anybody that was around in the music scene in the 80s will never forget SADHAPPY. Their shows were amazing, and the musicianship was beyond top notch, and they earned the moniker of being punk jazz. And I guess there's some truth to that. The energy level was definitely up there with punk, but the complexity of their material and the nature of the band really set them apart from everyone else. And so the basic core of the band is drummer Evan Schiller and bass player Paul Hinklin, and they could improvise like nobody else. And in fact, for several years in a row, there used to be a local paper called The Stranger and a couple of other local papers that voted Paul Hinklin and Evan Schiller the best bass player and the best drummer in town for several years, and they certainly deserved it. And by uh, by 1992, they had integrated a saxophone player, Skerrick, and he is, of course, world renowned now. He left SADHAPPY and joined a band called Critters Buggin' that basically kind of mined some of the same areas that SADHAPPY did, but SADHAPPY still were completely unique. The fact that they focused their amazing technique and their powerhouse approach to music into this band was really something to hear. And there's several albums out, and I'll post those below. They came and went. It seemed like they were around for a long time here in Seattle, but looking back now, it's a brief window altogether. But in 1992, they released an album called Depth Charge, and then in 1993, they released a live album, and then in 1994, they released an album called The Good, the Bad, and the Scary. And then in 1998, another album called Good Day, Bad Dreams. And they seem to be somewhat influenced by a British band called Backdoor that existed in the early 70s. And that band also had a staggering technique and musicianship, and with a bass and drums lineup augmented by other musicians. But there isn't a whole lot of bands that you can really compare to SADHAPPY. They definitely had a jazz element. And they had the energy of punk and just an incredible ability to improvise. And so they had tunes per se, but a lot of their stuff was just driven by an astonishing ability to improvise. And Evan Schiller was a drummer who could really do just about anything. And Paul Hinklin's one of the most amazing bass players I've ever heard in my life. And you put the two of them together, even with just that lineup of bass and drums, they could really muster some incredible music. And I had the good fortune actually of forming a band with SADHAPPY in 1996 or so. I hooked up with a guitar player, an amazing guitar player, Mr. Neutron, and with myself writing the material and on vocals, and hooked up with the band SADHAPPY, and we formed a band called Hairy Eyeball. We only existed for about 6 months, but a lot of the instrumental material by Eyeball was a lot like what SADHAPPY did, just incredible musicianship. And then when we focused in on just doing tunes, they just brought a lot of ability to rock, and were a powerhouse rhythm section. And it's really too bad that Hairy Eyeball didn't last longer, but I'll get to them on another video. So you have SADHAPPY basically as a drum and bass outfit. Then they had briefly a sax player named Skerrick, and during that period as a trio, there probably wasn't anybody on earth that could touch them as a drums, bass, sax band that was on the electric side, and with incredible improvisations and just, as I've said so many times already, just punk energy. incredible band. Paul Hinklin is now has had issues and left the music world, which is really a loss for everyone. Just completely genius bass player, and the kind of energy that he could put into anything he did was pretty astounding. And then Evan Chillers moved on. He worked with Mike Keneally and Michael Manring in a trio for a while, and now does a lot of production work and continues to work with Jeff Tate, the singer of Queensryche, Seattle. Uh, I'm not sure what you'd call him, pop metal. But anyway, a great vocalist, and Evan Chiller's been working with him for a long time. Evan Chiller also had a band back in the 90s called the Pleasure Elite, which was a large band, a lot of members with keyboards and just a heavy uh, tribal drum beat sort of thing with all kinds of crazy antics. And so they were an entity in themselves. But for most people in Seattle, everyone here that goes back to that period remembers being completely blown away by SADHAPPY, completely unique punk jazz band like no other. I'm Brian Fox. Thanks for watching I Hate Rock Music.